In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. So, hello everyone. My voice is a little under the weather, but I thought I still record something. And so, I guess this will be an episode that okay. So, dear viewers, look at the screen. All right. So the moment finds us in, and I gotta be, I guess, writing more this lecture than speaking because of my throat. But I'm gonna. This is a very important lecture. That means if you are someone who care for like the work I've done, this you're gonna see some of the major conclusions I've made be seen in this lecture. The idea of the march of the creator towards the creator, aside being a fascinating sentence, I was fascinated by, in some sense, how we as human beings uh, create thoughts, and how, if our thoughts were conscious, how would they treat their creator? So, or whatever. I am so sorry, guys. This was on mute, but still, I was just reading the stuff I wrote. So you didn't miss much. So, okay, I like this. This works. Right? So, to keep going, I hope you're looking at the screen. If you're driving, this maybe listen to a different lecture. I mean, but anyways, same sort of positive. I am someone, by the way, that aside from believing that this realm has a system, this world has a systematic, there's a system. This is a simulated testing zone within a defined survey. Being surpass the simulation by being aware of the creator of the simulation rather than identifying with the creator. And before I bring theology into this, right, I'm just saying, like, okay, just from an analytical position, I mean, this is how I'm naturally just doing this, where I'm looking at a sentence and I'm like, what sort of film preview does it create in my mind? Okay, so I notice that there's the verb, right? So the moment I see the verb, right, I got to think of, in some sense, what's moving in the moment. To be honest, my process of understanding reality, comprehending, is simply about wondering about what is moving in the moment. To me, I just realized this, that ultimately all events are movements, but the whole point of human life, due to our ability to notice beyond, a sort of looping reality, mankind is an awareness, it has a choice of awareness inside an awareness of choice that there is no choice. That means, like, think of it this way. Right now, do you have a choice of changing what the planet looks like? Like, we don't even have the choice, you know, to go to another planet right now. Imagine, like, you didn't fit in Earth. You're like, man, Earth is not for me. And then you realize let's say you could go to Mars, like in, I don't know, 2 hours or something. Yeah, that'd be next level. 2 hours is probably too short. You know, 2 hours, 10 minutes. But my whole point is that the whole point of here, I'll get to it. Okay. The reason this life is interesting is because they have unknown ends. Okay. When the created as an unknown end, the creator as an unknown end, it is only in the march, in the verb, in the action of life that it feels real. That means I can tell you, I'll give you an example. Imagine me sitting on the couch watching TV, and then suddenly I get hungry or I get thirsty. And let's say I get thirsty and I want a glass of orange juice. I'm still on the couch watching TV, but my mind has already opened the fridge door, and then it leaps from that visual to suddenly already me, like having poured the orange juice in a glass, and then leaps from that visual as if, like, after I've drank the orange juice and I'm rinsing the cup. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like my mind lives ahead, and in some sense, our minds do appear as if they are our creations. But one of the most important things, as a scholar of the mysteries of reality, I can tell you, it is there is a very huge distinction between ontology and epistemology. And this is so important because if a person doesn't understand this, I don't even know how you're experiencing your mind. You see, when you look at the evolution of the human being, you're looking at a territorial entity. Now, this territorial entity has managed to create a territory it's entitled to behind its eyes. What it means to be a modern human being, it's kind of like an animal that is making letters and sounds and concepts its territory. I'll get to this. This is so important. So, but I'm going to finish this. Okay. I'm going to simplify this. Is a noun. A noun is an effect, cause. And pretty much what you need to know about existence is that it's conditional, yo. There's conditions. You know what? We even have the ability to wonder about what being a high IQ is. You know, people on this planet way smarter than me. You know, there are people on who've been in this world that they, but the value of the smartness of an individual is in the discovery that is brought back to the tribe. What I'm seeing now is a sort of territorial warfare, but on an ideological front. Conditional um, position of form. Okay, the created is, we think it's a noun. Sorry, the creator. Even though we treat it as a noun, we will consider it as a pseudo noun. Pseudo, is that right? Pseudo noun. Okay, which is another way of saying it cannot be a noun, but our English, the English systems, like I don't know how to classify you, you know, this like concept. I'm going to call it a noun. Okay, but this is where it gets interesting. The creator position is not a noun. Okay, and it is the cause of effect of the cause of the effect. It's very important because I don't know if you've noticed, you're living a dualistic system. If you want to see beyond what you've understood, you have to see beyond the current dualistic rendering of reality you have. Now, cause of the effect. So if the effect is conditional, it is fair to say that we come from a conditional non-position beyond form. I'm sorry, unconditional. What am I saying? Cause of the effect. An unconditional non-position or impositionable, if that's how you can say it, an unconditional non-position beyond form, right? So far this is good. And what is March? I guess we come here and we say, so, or I'll come here and I'll say, for for the analyst, I'm the analyst here. For the analyst, these three major positions can be related or can connect. Therefore, this sentence turns to, therefore, the sentence march of march of the created towards the created can now can now be also interpreted as what is the purpose movement from a conditional position of form towards an unconditional non-position beyond. Now you're going to be like Mr. Within. Are you just complicating this? No, I'm expanding it. You understand what I mean? So if you keep looking at it, well, guess what? I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm like, a professor, but I'm a strategist to some degree, and a strategist in some sense looks at what can happen. Okay, that's the power of a strategist. It can see. It can see what others have not cared or concentrated to see. You understand? Or care to see another angle of how that moment in their life can have another meaning. So when I say this, so we went from something that was just, let's say, more on a vague way of looking at it. So march of the creator towards the creator, it's like such poetry, and then suddenly we're like, wait a minute, now I have to ask myself, what is the purposeful movement? Like, what is the purpose? So this would another version of this too. If this is V1, okay, one. I'm sounding Chinese. V1, V1. Anyway, sorry. I'm gonna keep going. So, what is the purposeful movement from a conditional position of form towards an unconditional non-position beyond form, or something that we can't put into a position? Another way of this would be, is what is the purpose of a conditional, or let's say, pretty much it would translate to the movement. It's pretty much, and something translates to, in my view, in the second in V2, I could say, how can a conditional being, how can a being in a conditional state, how can a being not in, how can a being in and as a conditional state reach an unconditional state? So, dear listener, if you have, if you somehow have managed to reach this last sentence, how can a being in, how can oh my god, let me write this down. How can a being in a conditional state reach an unconditional state? Or even like another view, I would say another way is, so how do, so what is the relationship? I mean, this wouldn't be a version, but then I brought myself to this checkpoint, right? How can a being in a conditional state reach an unconditional state, right? So I would come here and say, I'm trying to see how my mind moves. How can it be in a conditional state? So I'm going to focus on, yeah, it's pretty much how can a conditional being reach an unconditional, how can a conditional state of being lead you to an unconditional state? Now, this question, this the title, humorously, humorously, okay. we notice a paradox. Uh, we notice, so, yeah, when I have convenient, because we notice, we notice a duality. We notice one side of the coin, or what I would call a double-edged sword. That's what duality is. It's a double-edged sword. There's a spectrum: good, bad, weak, strong. Visible, invisible. Right, wrong. This is how human psyche is functioning. That means if you ask me, is the dualistic state of ideological processing of all information that the human being does the most advanced state, and I'll tell you it is not. So it's like saying, how can how can it's like saying, how can a good person be bad? How can how can a light being, how can a bright being be dark? Or this is where it gets exciting. How can how can I don't know. I mean, this is still up here. How can how can an exist how can an experiential how can an experiencer and how can be experienced? So it's like saying, so okay, let's go further. What can I write? Oh my god. All right, guys, I need a quick breather. I'll be back. Give me like 5 minutes. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm back. You know, so I've decided I'm not gonna write the rest of them, so I'm just gonna say it. It's easier that way. Ladies and gentlemen, where I am building with all of this and all that stuff I was writing is to explain to you really something that is it cannot be limited to a linear fashion. Because on some level we cannot ignore the unknown. We cannot ignore every moment of our being as that known variables and unknown variables, and what has been staring at you in every conscious waking moment of your life has been a process of a grand event beyond your understanding. Therefore, man's understanding is limited by that which he is standing under. But what are we truly standing under? Which is another way of saying, what are we truly understanding if we don't know where we are? We're living in a world right now. If you really kind of like be a little street smart about it, right, and think about human life, you will kind of realize our ancestors kind of attained consciousness and freaked out. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to give this meaning. The world was too big, too vast. For a long time, life was just following what happened. That means in the same way, like humans think, not like in the same way the human being had an evolutionary leap by becoming aware of its ecosystem and becoming conscious even beyond its ecosystem and realizing it can redirect itself differently than how its environment has programmed it. That's really the fascination of the human being. The human being is an organism, and there's many organisms on this planet. But the behavior of this organism is something else. So we got to understand that we're like this organism. Sure, call yourself an animal, but you're not behaving like any other animal on this planet. Therefore, we have to consider other angles. To me, we have confused civilization. That means I'm sorry, I honor the ancestry of the human legacy, the human odyssey. I honor the founders, which means the founders means the first human beings that somehow figured out how to continuously reproduce. And one of the most intense things I was thinking about, like there was a time in life where I don't even know like how it was, obviously, but it was as if like how would the process of labor, like you know what I mean, take place. You understand? That means was the intelligence to do that act there, or was it in some sense environmental? Sometimes it's very strange. If you ask me to compare my body's intelligence to like my mind's intelligence, the body speaks a different language. Honestly, in the same way, like I'm a bilingual person, and when I'm in Iran, I have an access, I have an ability to access that culture in a way that somebody in Canada doesn't. And when I'm in Canada, I have an ability to access this culture in a way that somebody in Iran doesn't. You know, for me, there's something very fascinating about how it's all here and we don't know why, and then we wonder about why, and we realize the why is over our head, and then at some point you're like, okay, what is the major point of this life? And when I say march of the created towards the creator, do you understand what I'm telling you, folks? The depth behind that sentence is something very, very important. That means if I don't know, if I am a being, I have lived around 12,000 days on this planet. That means 12,000 times I opened my eyes to the whole the story and I wasn't convinced. And then I woke up a day. That's the only reason I believe that I'm still alive. You know, that means I truly, like a part of me somehow, I can't say believe because I feel like I know. I know that there is something I need to see and make sure that my eyes don't just belong to me, it belongs to my species. You understand? The most complex action. Because in my inner life, I have lived in the future, folks. And you don't understand how blessed and grateful you would be in that civilization because you are living in a civilization right now that is, I'm sorry, immature. You're living in an immature civilization, which is another way of saying if your civilization, if the world was designed looks like this, then oh my God, we got one. And to me, there were some people on this earth, to be honest, growing up, like it was just an enforcement of them. That means I cannot tell you that in my it was only when I realized there was something more to it all that I know that I freed myself from the belief or the ideas I was hiding or hiding behind that. That means to me it's hilarious. My whole life has been an effort to, in some sense, clarify. And I've realized that the attempt to even give meaning to reality is like an verb from a small world trying to capture the verb from a big. It's impossible. There's limits to being an existential entity for us. This is why I'm saying the created are in the conditional position. But what can the created do? And how does truth truly move? And so, is it just about, the body of an organism? Is it just about the mind or the direction that this organism finds or goes? Or is it in some sense about there was something deeper going on, and if you noticed, you could never die? But if you didn't notice it, you were in some sense trapped in a box of, like, you know what I mean? What's worse? What's really worse than being in like a vacuum of space is like creating our own small world in it and then creating another vacuum. Excuse me, not creating world. So it's like we're inside a vacuum, and we, in some sense, created another vacuum, and inside that created a world. And then we're like, wait a minute, though. Are we just movements in emptiness? Is that what force is? Like, I don't know if I can see a personality to like kinetic force, you know? Like, I don't know if electromagnetic force has a personality. You know what I mean? That means how fields behave, how even we find ourselves as a node. To be honest, it's kind of like, they're like, yo, man, how come that person never died? And they're like, yeah, their body died, but they never died because while they were alive, they just asked, how can life die? How can force stop being force? And to me, I realize it's can't. Even scientifically, you say a force cannot is a push or a pull. You know what I mean? But it can't be. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy is, in some sense, the transference of some sort of activity. You understand? That means it's like I was born in 1991. I'm gonna live to whatever point, and at some point, I'm gonna like exit this realm, and I'll be like, okay, what was the damn point of you existing? And to me, I see two grand purposes. That means in my life, one of them, at first I was like, yo, man, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need to have kids and become responsible for a bunch of other souls now. I had this mentality. And so I have come to the realization that there are like three levels, three games you're playing in life at once. And most people are only get up to level two, and usually that they loop at level two. So whether you care or not, this is an interesting moment. For it is interesting because a node in the field is trying to explain to you that beyond the field, beyond the laws of nature, you are inside the commanded realm. That means in my youth, my inner child thought that in some sense it can remain in the silliness, in the innocence of the silliness and playfulness of a world that was okay in some sense but wasn't changing. To be honest, more and more as life goes on, I'll be like, why did the educational system, why did just civilization, society condition me to value nouns more than verbs and not realize that it's all like it doesn't matter what you have, it doesn't matter what you are, isn't it all moving, yo? You know what I mean? You know, I think I wanted to say though, but I thought, I felt cooler than that. Yeah. But so, if people wonder, does it break my heart? When I have zero viewers and I'm talking about like, if we're at the depth of the nature of existence, and it doesn't because this emptiness, that means you don't understand. At some point in life, you unlock the levels to yourself as a being by not like some guru coming and putting his thumb on your head or some guy coming and, saying something to you and you suddenly becoming enlightened. No, my dear viewer, do you know what the self help industry has done? Do you know what, in some sense, the modern world has done that it doesn't even know it has done? And it back, like, like if you asked my soul, I would say that, man, you know, there's a moderator that doesn't want to see, that wants to see. It's like there's a force on this planet. It's a moderating force, but it's not an admin force. You know, that means God, we are so lucky that the moderator is evil and the admin isn't. Do you understand? Like sometimes when I think if the roles of Shaitan and God were switched, do you know what I mean? I think as if that is what hell is. Hell is like a realm where Shaitan is in some sense. It's the will of a being that dislikes that in some sense subconsciously is fighting against itself. I remember I interviewed a friend on my YouTube channel, and he said that I asked him, "What do you think the devil is?" And he said the devil was a negation of himself. You know, right? And what does that mean? Because it's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be commenting about the unseen like this, but I'm just being very sincere and honest. That the point of life is not, yo, did I follow my desires and sin and loop in a simulation, or did I like transcend this and become the purest and pure and close to God? To me, as just consciousness in a world, before they tell me a story, the presence of awareness to existence before inner subjective movement symbolizes it into characteristic. Why do you think they call it the Pure Lands? Why do you think, in some sense, Buddha, in some sense, guided in people, in some sense, towards their heart? You know what I mean? Where in their heart they were at peace. You don't understand. The higher planes are not at war with themselves. The higher realms are not fighting themselves. They already know how things happen, but the lower realms are fighting themselves. It's like you don't see it, but believing you're an idea is equivalent to biting yourself. It's like it's some part of it feels off. I like if you ask me how have I felt about my name, like I in some sense, carry it like armor, but at the same time, I am I have a love and hate relationship with language because I mean technically in some manner, from some view, very early on in my life, I realized I wasn't treating myself as a self in a simulation. I was just simply being the moment that was here. All movement eventually, after a certain effort, you see this life, if somebody was like, okay, Mr. Within, what do you think, like life, like just conscious, just being conscious of a world wants from what we are? It is the legend of the soul's life. We have reached that point in human history where not only is this level of consciousness, the state of consciousness archaically reviving, because at some point, let me tell you what the difference of living as a body, living as a mind, and living as a soul is. When you live as a soul, or let me say it this way, yeah, when you live as a soul, you are not living, you're not waking up and being like, I'm an idea, yo, what's this idea going to do for the rest of its life? No, 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 that's not how you're starting the moment. You start the moment by, in some sense, noticing you are the experiential force. You are an experiential force that is accessing a state of consciousness. So, all language, all ideology, everything you have ever known was just a massive classification of states of consciousness. And so, it is the realm where, in some sense, you're going to see, how they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend? The philosophers, oh man, philosophers, like guys, don't think you know who a philosopher is. The modern definition of a philosopher is, I'm sorry, it's some sad, it is some sad, excuse my foul language, but the term fits accurately. You're looking at I shouldn't say, excuse me. You're looking at an inhibited species. Your freedom is limited. But because you're free in that limitation, you could be happy still, but it doesn't mean that that limitation is the limit. Living as a body means you wake up and you're this organism. Legit, you're an organism. If let's say, in the future generations, they were so like, I don't know, they were so technological that they somehow time traveled from the future who was like some like cyborg of a human or something. You know what I mean? Came to me and in some sense was like, what is it like being human? In the future, we've forgotten what it is to be human. And I would say being human is like suddenly you've logged into the day, and the first thing you notice is that your awareness is an environment. Man is no longer living only in an objective ecosystem. There is the inner realms, That means, yo, I maybe everybody's gonna lie to you and act like you're just a physical object, but I see you. I see all of you behind your eyes being an awareness to all the ways you can act, and but in front of your eyes, acting in a certain way. I do see that you see further, you see deeper than what you are. But why do we see deeper than what we are? Why has existence positioned us? Why are, or let me say it this way, why are we positioned in existence to have a body that is in the year 2025 where there is no flying cars, but God, the system admin, has created a user interface that in some sense extends to an inner development. That means we're not just being aware of the hardware of existence, we're aware of the software too. We're aware we're being software, but excuse me, but a squirrel maybe not. You know what I mean? Maybe those organisms that don't have a developed prefrontal cortex, like, you know what I mean? Like there's a layer of our brain that is just legit like, okay, how are we gifted this? We are wondering about the true depths of what sort of being is here. They're like, yo, get married. I'm like, okay, all right, I can see a perspective now where if they were like get married, I'll be like, okay, so I don't know what world we are all in, and I don't know what self I truly am because the system has been designed with unknown. That means there's a mysterious. It's called mysterianism, but in some sense it means that there is certain ways that reality is happening that you cannot consciously process. That means you might have an ego and be like, yo, man, I'm the smartest information processing brain, in the land, whatever that land you think is. We're talking about the next generations being a more advanced life. You are more advanced life than your ancestors, and every day of your life, if you haven't been advancing, then in some sense, just like me, for years you were trapped in a world that you were waiting for it to give you the permission. What if the world cannot see you? For all children in the world that you wonder about what it means to be a grown up, is that the responsibility of this life that you are, how exciting it is that it's like you don't need to buy a video game, you're already in one. Instead of pixels, it's the periodic table of elements that constitutes it. So really, the depth of the awareness of man. I'm like this dude here. I'm like, you know who I am in history? Mr. Within was that human in history who every day, all of human history was like, hey man, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, hey, human history, we don't know what's looking through our eyes. We don't know who is receiving and what is, in some sense, communicating. And let me tell you why. Because just like it's the same element, but in a state of solid, liquid, gas, in the same way, what do you think the soul is, folks? First of all, it's unknowable, but to the modern mind, could it be that some people are waking up and realizing that their consciousness is not their personality and that their consciousness is a node in a field of intelligent activity beyond human comprehension? So I am Muslim, meaning that I believe that the system admin of this simulated existential system we're in is, in some sense, has no equivalent partner. That means when you ask a Muslim what is truth, it's like, buddy, if you can say it, you're deluded. Why? Because truth is the beyond. And the prophets, in some sense, do you know why magic is obsolete in this world? Like people can try. You try to be as magical as you want. In the sense, I'm not in some sense challenging you, but I'm saying be as magical as you want, but you will begin to see that this world is working with what will appear as hidden laws. And for a deeper being, you're going to realize the future generations are going to have a more intimate relationship with identifying as a field of activity or within a field of activity rather than as a specific character in that activity. Like, what the F? Like, the guy, like, imagine one day, I'm just eating a hamburger. You know what I mean? And they're like, okay, this is the guy who eats hamburgers. And I'm like, guys, I just ate it once. They're like, no, we had that moment where we saw you eat a hamburger, and we think from now on you're a guy that eats hamburgers all the time. You know what I mean? And it's as if you look at the human mind and you look at 8 billion unknown souls. Oh my God. Guys, I can totally feel like if Batman's mask malfunctioned, like I totally understand how that feels. Okay, this works. I'm old school, guys. Anyways. It's like I'm a jack of all trades, but my name isn't Jack. You know what I mean? Anyways, to keep going. To truly wonder about the presence of our being, I want to get into that part of saying, like, all that I'm trying to explain to you is how we're starting from a conditional position in this video game of life, and there is a return to an unconditional state. So, death to me means that the conditions of life are not being regulated by this idea that I'm assuming I am that is owning the whole world. But in actuality, you begin to realize that as you trust the world, like you can distrust this world your whole life, or you can be like, what if I don't trust it like a naive fool, but what if I trust that it's all going to work out? And that my moment has a value to that which created this world. Because to me, more than it feels like I was born here and this is my home, for my consciousness, for my body, this is earth is my home. But for my mind, it's kind of like it's like appearing in a house party and you don't know who the host of the house party is. Not a unethical, like, demented house party. You know what I mean? I mean like a very advanced, like how like a house party in an advanced civilization would be pretty much like people partying and coming up with the most genius ideas, because you understand right now in an advanced civilization they're going to value states of consciousness, right? But in current civilization, they only value a specific format of consciousness. You don't understand. Like, there's so much to advance. So for me, if they were like, yo, bro, you're created, and how would you march towards the creator? I would say that's what my life has, like, I've come to understand my life as, right? That means it's as if I open my eyes, I access the world, and then what is the world? It's a value proposal. It's a value proposition. That means I open my eyes, watch stuff happen, and based on how I've assigned meaning before I see the stuff happen, there comes new meaning. So life is fascinating, not because we know it. This is why, for example, you had like Albert Camus, who in some sense, that dude is known for absurdism in philosophy. And there is something strange about absurdity, not the external expression of it. and not the internal, like confused psychological expression of it. But I'm saying not an absurdity you're identifying as, but noticing the absurdity of a moment as a conditional being. You're like, so what it means is like, all right, they've given us the problem. That means I'm this guy, Mr. Within, sitting in my, I don't know, Mr. Within in office, right? I'm gonna probably like, compete with Iron Man's like, like workshop. You know what I mean? But it's gonna be like, or I don't know, a Mr. Withinian studio could be as simple as like a table, a notebook, a pen, and a laptop. That's enough. I believe we're all, as conditional beings, marching into a unconditional state of being. To me, Islam, is in the Holy Quran. It says that this book is a book for those who believe in the unseen. That means you're not like that lost, you know. And for it is a confirmation and a warning. I got goosebumps when I read that in the Holy Quran. Why? Because it's not here to tell you what to do, because that's your test. God is testing you. Do you know what I mean? In the Holy Quran, there's a passage that says, even if everybody acted perfect and sinless, civilized, God would wipe out civilization and bring a civilization of sinners. Not because sin is the point, because you are a conditional being, and it is the mercy of an unconditional being to, in some sense, present a storm for you. So you step out of the looping simulations you have been identifying with. Because in the same way, a body, outgrows a T-shirt. Do you know what I mean? In some sense, believe it or not, the soul outgrows the ideas of its mind. Like I could have just given one lecture, 10,000 people could have listened to it, and I'd be like, all right, that's the 10,000 talks, guys. 10,000 versions of my talk exist. Just go find those 10,000 people and ask them. You're going to see 10,000 different talks. Because where is the meaning going? The meaning is going inside. Have you noticed? Like you hear someone talk and you're like, okay, I'm going to process that information. What does that mean? Like Jordan Peterson is out there on stages shouting to like young kids, you know what I mean? Articulate your lives, you fools. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't say it like that, but you know what I mean. He's trying to awaken people to purpose by them realizing that the fantasy land that the mind provides is not worth it to loop in compared to the actuality of what is the world. What if there is a moment in civilization that is waiting for you? What if right now you're a musician and in some sense you need to exist as some one person, as like the Sunday of millions of people or something? One day, like you understand. To me, you don't. It doesn't matter. For me, it transcends age. It transcends position. That means I'm a type of. If I was a commander of a species, I would unite the species, and I would be like, guys, I want an empowered species, because I truly, my ego. You're listening to a soul. You're listening to a being. Like ego in Islam is called nafs. What is nafs? Ego, the idea that your limited self, it's like your lower self interpretation of being. It's like your low resolution. Imagine like forget the lower higher self. Imagine like God is the highest resolution. And do you know there's seven levels of resolution, like seven Jannat al Firdaus is the highest level, the highest resolution of being close to God. And guys, when I'm saying resolution, I think that's an epic way of talking about it, because like you know how you change a YouTube video's resolution and you're like, okay, it uses less data, but at the same time, what am I looking at? I'm telling you, when you sin, when you are evil, when you are cruel, maybe for just a few moments you feel high resolution by being evil and powerful, but your soul is you're gonna have a low resolution access. That means you're gonna be further away from like evil people. it's like it doesn't matter. You're an entity from a designer's perspective. You're like even chaos is like just some sort of intelligent activity, right? Some sort of design movement of design, right? But I'm saying it's all about this cool vibe of being like, wait a minute, maybe it's about me quickly wondering about, am I in the original Earth? You know, am I in the original timeline, or am I identifying with my naps, which is a simulated timeline? You don't even know, like, you know what I mean? That means like sometimes it's very weird, you know? It's like I think kind of like I understand my shyness as in my youth, because to be a person to someone is to exist in their attention. So the value of your existence is based on their attention for them. We are marching in a world right now. Existence is a march. You don't see it. Every breath you take is a step forward towards the unconditional resolution. You know, that means to me today, in what we, in our own fictional way, to me, like, you know what I mean? Language is fiction, you know, but it's fiction that is trying to, in some sense, resemble nonfiction, but we can't know the edge of nonfiction. So it's like, I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, if I have, like, so, like, everybody who's had kids so far, like, you guys are brave AF, you know, because to me, if I don't know what's truly going on here, how can I be honest? So you see, it's the challenge of being honest in a world that is dishonest, and you're like, wait a minute, how am I living as an honest man in a dishonest world and surviving? And people are like, okay, the higher power is guiding you. You know, have faith, believe, and just keep praying, keep being a good person, and good things will happen. But let me tell you what it is. It's not about you trying to be a good person. That I think that's low resolution act. A higher resolution act, or a high resolution view would be, what would the most advanced state of this moment be? This is my way of going towards, I don't know if it takes me to God or where it takes me, but I am my when it comes to conditional life, I have been, it's like every day, everything that exists, in my view, is trying to convince me that's all it. And I can't, and it's hilarious because I know from very early on that it is not, there is a domain, there's like a hidden sky here that humanity has, it's uncharted. We haven't noticed there was a sky inside our sky. And they're like, what does that mean? You mean the atmosphere is a portal, and like maybe it can be used that way? I don't know. They're like, yo, imagine some fortune tellers like, hey, do you have a glass orb for me to tell the future? I'm like, I don't know, but we're all in one. And what's in the future is, in some sense, a possibility. That means you don't get it. You are not your personality, but you choose to be, because that's the language of the civilization you're living in now, and it's 100% understandable. You know, we're not living in a time where people who, let's say, understand the deeper nature of how things are happening. It's not like they can be summarized. You can, but it's unnecessary. It has no value. They're like, yo, man, this guy's giving a next level motivational speech for soldiers, but the people who are he's giving the speech to don't identify as soldiers or not, or soldiers, for example, right? But really, it's with purpose. To me, it's like purpose is, all right, everybody's being something, as if everybody's dealt a different hand and they have to play that hand. And if they fold that hand, they fail, because it's like a one time thing, at least in some manner. That means the talk I gave yesterday, I'm no longer that person today. Like new dimensions, new perceptions, new views, the clarity, the realization of how organisms are not just uh, maintaining their posture in front of their eyes, but every person has maintained their posture in regards to a character in a story. That means if you're someone who you can, if you're someone who can write a biography on yourself, you're 100% like were at some point just the simulation, like purely taken by the simulation. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say taken by the simulation. I should say that what is real for you? Ask this question. There's moments in my life where it's a reality check of how I'm checking my reality. It's kind of like me being like, okay, how am I being a position in the moment right now? Like, what is this? Any moment I do this, and it's kind of refreshing because I start from scratch. And what I mean by that is like I find I have no opinions on anything, and I try to just stare at something and have no thought on it, and it's so easy because I zoom in on the design of what I'm staring at. So I extend the. It's like if an average person thinks it takes a second to observe something, I'm saying concentration is like telling yourself, all right, it's going to take me a minute to just look at this and then consider what I'm looking at. So I'm not going to have a thought on the act of looking because I'm looking to see what there is, right? Because what it is for consciousness, I find, like if you identify as consciousness, then guess what it is for you. It's like you are either generating meaning, like either you're moving, you are the intelligence that moves the moment, or there's a movement beyond like the sectors of your intelligence. Like I have a certain I to some degree know my limits, but I also know that it's the mercy of the systematic. I was having a conversation with a Christian friend of mine, and I was trying to explain to her that like Muslims cannot, it's a sin, like the biggest sin in Islam is to equate a partner to God, which means to equate any conditional state to God. That means if somebody says God is joy, I'll be like, if you infinitize it to a point where it's unfathomable, then I'll be like, sure, but it is beyond man. Do you understand? It is an awareness in Islam. Like you gotta understand how heavy this is, right? Because it's like you're this being on a planet, and you, in some sense, realize, okay, you didn't create this world, and you ask yourself who did, and Islam tells you it's not a who. It cannot be anything in the world, bro. This world in Islam, it's called dunya, and dunya. Why do they call it a test? Because there is a reality beyond it. The exam hall, after you are tested in the exam hall, imagine like you write I don't know, like in a university exam hall, right? And after you're tested, you wait. You understand? The moment of testing and the moment of judgment are different. However, to me, it's all about being like, what is the true logic of the moment? I am that person telling you, and this is from my heart, from my heart of hearts, meaning that this is the furthest I have seen so far. That we are unknown beings, which instantly means we don't know what we're capable of, and we don't know what we can do and be, how deeply we're able to be. And we're in an unknown world, and human civilization was that effort to know it all because it was meaningless. We're like, what are we looking at? Just this massive unknown place, and we're like, okay, let's call it a place. You know what I mean? We're just like we're looking at this massive unknown movement, and we're like, okay, let's call it a place first, and then let's name that place. It's a massive game. You don't understand. Like you don't see it, but it's not just spiders that, in some sense, weave webs. The brain has a very complicated network to the degree that you can look at someone and they can legit bring a memory. They can look like someone you've seen before. Do you know what I mean? And legit, you have two moments. It's like your mind is living in two moments, even though your body it's in its present. Like your body is living in one. So my body's life is I have to honor all the cells of my existence. That means, in some sense, it's like you apologize to the world, to everything, including even the nothingness you have felt, the nothing you have been. There's moments in this life that I have felt nothing, or like felt like nothing. And people are like, "What are you saying, Mr. Within? Do you know? Do you want to go that deep and share this?" And I'll be like, "Of course," because it's so deeper. It's like you're shy to step into the game. You don't understand. There's people in the game shy to advance in the game. And then there are those who realize that the march of the created towards the creator is the realization that we an unconditional within an unconditional being has created a conditional being in a conditional state that is imperfect. So the conditional being that is not convinced that the world is perfection. It is dangerous sometimes assuming that how what we see others are. It's so important to discriminate between the inner realm and outer realm, because my mind, it's like my body's living a biological game of is playing a biological game of survival. It's like a level of life, and my mind is playing a game of purpose. That means when I wake up, I'm like, why am I being energy right now? Okay, why am I having consciousness and ability of free will? I'm like, okay, so it's very obvious I'm here to direct my energy. But where do I, or what do I direct my energy? Right? And I thought about it that what would I look like? Like, I'll be honest, there was a moment where when I suddenly tapped, when I discovered the advancement principle, which means I feel like I'm the first person on planet Earth that has realized, that has legit, like in a mythological way, it's like I feel the spirit of advancement by the command of God has chosen, right? That means I am speaking as, I don't know, I feel like I'm sponsored by um, other moderators, but it's only by the command of the system admin because I did not ask for their sponsorship. I am just asking for the system. I am, do you know what it is? It's like really what life is all about, folks, is about what are you looking at? Now, that what are you looking at could be an object in front of your eyes, could be a subject or a memory or a thought behind your eyes, or an event in your inner realms behind your eyes. Because to me, physics, what physics is too scared to realize when it looks in the mirror is that just like how Neo saw the source code of reality in the Matrix and kind of like became unstoppable, undefeatable, because he no longer was an ego code that was being thrown around by individual archetypes. That means I'll be like, thanks, Carl Jung, but you might not believe it. Finally, we have reached the era beyond all of Jungian thought. That means the Jungius, it's like, how do I say it? It's the immigration of consciousness towards that which is the most important in a world at all. And I'm telling you, please notice, you did not create existence. I would emphasize this again and again. As a created being, it means you didn't create yourself. But as a conscious being, it means you're responsible for how you've been created and how else you can create. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes I used to think of it this way, but again, God knows, Nancy, the system admin knows truly the depth of all of this. I'm just, I guess, sharing an view I have access to. I would say it's equivalent to what was there before the thought of you wanted it, and you'll see its space, and you'll see that you're identifying with add-ons to a space. But if you know what you call it, an intelligent space, you call it a field. Like, you know how in Pokemon, the Pokemon like evolved. You know, there was Charmander, became Charmeleon, and then Charizard or something. Do you know? In the same way, there is an evolution of not just the idea of man, but the state of consciousness that allows that to be there. In deep sleep, there's no ego, there's no self or to have a purpose. It's like there's absence. It's like I wasn't there, time passed, I woke up, and okay, back at it again. But where am I? How am I convinced that just because I woke up from my dream, that means the mind is not dreaming? I feel like the mind and the heart are playing games, like eternal games. Like if the most closest thing to an eternal being I've seen, like behavior of an eternal like quality, is the heart. You know what I mean? And just the human body is so fascinating. It's like it's not just alive based on its nutrition. It's not just nourished by nutrition. It's nourished by the field of intelligence it it experiences itself as. That means, as an idea, you can get tired as an idea. But for a moment, just think what it's like. It's like the person is a fool, but in emergencies, they're like the smartest person ever. And you're like, what? Anyways, thank you for listening. But just to reach a conclusion here, I feel, man, I even prepared the research section. Let me just ask like, okay, let me just ask ChatGPT to summarize all of this that you have answered in one very profound and advanced paragraph. So I just shortened the research component, guys. I'm going to read for you. I asked AI like something about like what did I ask AI? In the most advanced civilization imaginable, how would the how oh my god, I'm right. In the most advanced civilization imaginable, how would the whole civilization be divided into sectors? So I was going to read this and it was this super long thing, but I just asked ChatGPT to turn it into a paragraph. So this is the research component, folks. It's not much, but it's something. AI says, and this is ChatGPT, not even like I like my membership finished. This is simple one. In the most advanced civilization imaginable, AI says, ChatGPT says, in the most advanced civilization imaginable, society is organized into a seamlessly interwoven set of sectors that reflect humanity's higher evolutionary integration. The cognitive sector, where minds interface with shared fields of intelligence, the scientific technological sector, where matter is engineered with precision at every scale, the ecological sector, where planetary systems and human systems function as one organism, the cultural ethical sector, which cultivates meaning, art, identity, and moral coherence, the civic governance sector, which operates through transparent, distributed intelligence rather than hierarchy, and the intersector, which manages exploration, cosmic understanding, and species level continuity. Cities are living symbiotic architectures. Bioengineered, luminous, adaptive, and responsive to thought. Transportation is instantaneous and seamless. Resources are post scarcity through controlled energy fields. And human lives unfold in a state where biological, technological, and spiritual intelligence are unified. Because individuals no longer identify as isolated subjects, but as nodes within a planetary field of cognition. Conflict dissolves, collaboration becomes instinctive, and each person contributes as a unique frequency to a harmonized civilizational intelligence. That's what's up. That's exactly like that's the level it's at. This civilization is in quotations most advanced, not because of technology alone, but because consciousness, ethics, science, governance, ecology, and culture have converged into a single coherent operating system. one where humanity finally lives as a coordinated, self aware, ever evolving species aligned with the long arc of cosmic advancement. That means maybe all that an advanced civilization needed was some podcaster to tell, you know, the immature species, that means that I'm telling myself to, an immature species that in some sense you have incredible potential, but if you don't get to see that, like it's not like why. You know what I mean? So it's so important to, in this life, care not just for all the things you know and can identify in it, but for all the things you don't know. And that's a way where you'll understand. For me, marching towards, it's like my soul. Anyways, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced. We are God's creation. We're legit. Like, theology is understanding that the most advanced created a very advanced creation because it could be nothing else because it was created by the most advanced. That means the divine commands that are the source code behind all the ego codes that think they're running themselves is, it is beautiful in a way that it's as if your soul remembers its original command when at the moment it was created. So to me, marching to the system admin is like I'm legit every day of my life. I am like taking steps of fascination as a simulated position in reality to the origin state. God to me, God is the original being. We're all simulated beings. But because we were created by an original power, there is something within us that is like original, that in some sense returns to the origin. In the same way Muhammad Ali said, by the, what was it called? Muhammad Ali said that in 21, excuse me, um, when he retires, he has 21 years to prepare to meet God, his creator. So it's a very, it's like it's like you right now have a relationship as a part of a process with the whole process and that which commands the process beyond, or that which is beyond you. Like, how can I explain it to you? That the world is moving beyond our understanding, but it's moving. And it's moving in a way where free will is an opportunity to align rather than an opportunity to act like me, you know, like it's way better for me to, like, I would prefer an unknown, like, I rather explore what else there is in regards to the furthest frontiers of human consciousness and rather rather than to have the days leave. Anyways, thank you for listening. I hope this was a good lecture in the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, person.